Daniel was born into a village deep in the heart of Africa, where tradition held a tight grip on the people. He was the first son of Madame Veronica, a woman with pride in her roots but torn between modernity and the customs that shaped her life. In their village, it was an unwritten rule that the first son of every family became a Catholic priest. The community believed this tradition brought blessings, peace, and prosperity to the entire family. Madame Veronica had dreams that her only son, Daniel, would follow this path. She envisioned herself as the mother of a respected reverend father, earning a place of honor among the village women. Whenever they gathered for meetings, she would imagine them singing her praises. But Daniel was different. From a young age, he had always been charming and full of life. He had the looks that made women stop in their tracks, the kind of eyes that seemed to see straight into your soul, and a voice that could make the hardest of hearts soften. He knew he was handsome, and so did the girls in the village. They admired him, giggled shyly whenever he passed by, and whispered about his smile that seemed to light up the whole village. Yet with all the attention he got from the girls his age, it wasn't them that Daniel was interested in. He had an unusual taste, one that would cause a lot of trouble in the years to come. Daniel was drawn to married women. He found them mature, experienced, and he claimed they had a certain grace that young girls didn't have. To him, they were more than just attractive. They were his spec, as he often said with a mischievous grin. Madame Veronica was a proud and determined woman. She had raised Daniel alone after her husband passed away when Daniel was just a boy. In a village where tradition was law, she knew she had to make sure her son fulfilled his role as the firstborn. As soon as Daniel turned 16, she started urging him to join the seminary, where he would be groomed to become a Catholic priest. It was her deepest desire. But Daniel had other plans. The thought of spending his life in celibacy, denying himself the pleasures of the world, was the furthest thing from his mind. He enjoyed life too much, especially the company of women. His handsome face, lean but strong physique, and smooth talk made him the center of attention wherever he went. He was aware of this power and enjoyed the way women looked at him, especially the older married ones. Despite his mother's persistent pleas, Daniel kept delaying. "Mama, I'm still young," he would say. "Let me enjoy life a bit before committing to such a serious path." But Madame Veronica wasn't pleased. In their village, if a first son refused the priesthood, it was seen as a bad omen, bringing shame to the family. Soon, whispers started circulating among the women in the village. At the women's meetings, Madame Veronica noticed how some of them began to distance themselves from her. They would lower their voices when she walked by and exchange glances that made her blood boil. The women subtly mocked her because her son refused to follow the path of tradition. Things got worse when she was officially excluded from the village women's meeting, an honor she once took for granted. The leaders told her that until her son entered the seminary, she was no longer welcome. The shame was unbearable. Madame Veronica could no longer hold her head high in the community. All her dreams of being praised as the mother of a reverend father were slipping away. One evening, after returning from another humiliating day at the market, she sat Daniel down. "My son," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow, "do you see how people treat me now? Do you see how they disrespect me? This isn't just about you, Daniel. It's about our family's honor. Don't let me suffer like this. If you love me, go to the seminary and make me proud." Daniel could see the pain in his mother's eyes. He knew she had sacrificed everything for him, and a part of him felt guilty. Reluctantly, he agreed to become a priest, not because he was called, but because he couldn't stand to see his mother in pain. However, deep down, he knew he had no intention of living the holy life. He was just buying time, hoping his mother would be satisfied enough to get the village off her back. The news that Daniel had agreed to enter the seminary spread quickly through the village. The women who had turned their backs on Madame Veronica suddenly began greeting her warmly again, praising her as the blessed mother of a future priest. Madame Veronica's pride returned, and she regained her position in the women's meetings. But while Madame Veronica was basking in her renewed respect, Daniel's heart was far from committed to the religious life. During his time in the seminary, he went through the motions, attending classes, learning prayers, and participating in church activities. But in his private moments, his thoughts wandered back to the life he was leaving behind, especially to the women he had grown fond of. Daniel found ways to sneak out of the seminary on weekends, using excuses like visiting sick relatives or attending family events. These escapes became his little adventures back to the village, where he would rekindle his old relationships. He knew how to charm his way into any woman's heart, especially those married women who secretly longed for excitement. They found in Daniel what they missed in their mundane lives, a thrill, a spark that made them feel alive again. For Daniel, the game became even more exciting because it was forbidden. The more he tasted the forbidden fruit, the more he craved it. He knew it was wrong, that he was supposed to be preparing to serve God and guide others, but the thrill of sneaking around, the stolen glances, the quick touches, all of it fueled his desires. He began to see himself not as a man of God, but as someone who could have the best of both worlds: the respect and power of a priest, and the pleasure of a charmer who knew how to satisfy the women who were drawn to him. Daniel's time at the seminary continued, but his double life was taking root. He began planning his return to the village, not as the priest his mother envisioned, but as a man who could hide his dark desires behind the mask of holiness. After years in the seminary, Daniel finally completed his training and was ordained as a Catholic priest. The ceremony was grand, attended by nearly the whole village. Madame Veronica was the happiest mother in the world, dressed in her finest attire and beaming with pride. The people sang her praises, and she walked with her head held high, her earlier shame now forgotten. Father Daniel returned to the village as a celebrated figure. The villagers looked up to him with respect, seeing him as a holy man who had chosen to devote his life to God. But behind the cassock, Daniel was still the same man with his dangerous charm and secret desires. He knew that wearing the priest's robes only made him more attractive to the very women he had always been drawn to. The title Father gave him access to people's trust and respect, and he quickly realized how much power that brought him. At first, Father Daniel tried to keep up the pretense of being a dedicated priest. He delivered passionate sermons that touched on the importance of faithfulness, purity, and living according to God's will. The people admired him even more, calling him a true man of God. Yet the more he preached about these virtues, the more his own desires burned within him. He was now surrounded by the very women he had longed for, and the temptation was overwhelming. The women in the village admired him openly. Some were drawn to his looks, while others found his new authority as a priest irresistible. Married women in particular started seeking his counsel, coming to him with their marital problems, hoping for some guidance or comfort. Daniel knew how to play his role well. He would listen to them with a serious face, offering prayers and advice, but underneath it all, he was studying them, waiting for the right moment to act. Among the many women in the church, 2 married women caught his attention more than the others. One was Cecilia, a mother of 3, who often came to church looking weary from the struggles of home life. The other was Grace, a trader known for her beauty and sharp tongue, but who softened whenever she was around Father Daniel. Both women were married to men who were either too busy or too indifferent to notice how their wives were slowly getting drawn into Daniel's web. Father Daniel started his game with subtle moves. He knew that openly pursuing these women could create a scandal that would ruin him. So he took his time, carefully laying the groundwork. He began by offering extra prayers for them during Mass, using their names as examples of virtuous women in his sermons. He made them feel special, as if they were somehow closer to God because of his attention. Cecilia was the first to fall into his trap. Her husband worked as a trader, often traveling to neighboring towns, leaving her alone for days on end. She was tired, lonely, and desperate for someone to talk to. Father Daniel saw this and took advantage of it. He invited her to the church under the pretext of needing help with church decorations or organizing charity events. They would spend hours together, and gradually his conversations with her shifted from spiritual matters to personal ones. He listened to her complaints about her husband, her struggles with raising her children, and the emptiness she felt. One evening, after an especially long conversation, Cecilia broke down in tears. Daniel moved closer, offering a shoulder to cry on. But what started as a comforting embrace quickly turned into something else. The lines between priest and woman blurred as they crossed into forbidden territory. That night marked the beginning of their secret affair. Meanwhile, Grace, the other woman, was a more difficult target. She was confident and always seemed in control, but that only intrigued Daniel more. He knew she was admired by many men in the village, and he wanted to prove that even she wasn't beyond his reach. He took a different approach with her, playing on her ego. He praised her beauty and intelligence, telling her that she deserved more than what her husband could offer. Grace, who had always been independent and proud, found herself flattered by the attention of the handsome priest. Their relationship grew slowly, starting with innocent conversations after church, then progressing to late-night visits to discuss spiritual matters. Father Daniel fed her just enough sweet words to keep her hooked, making her believe that their connection was something special, something almost divine. Within a few months, both Cecilia and Grace had become fully entangled in Father Daniel's web. They began sneaking around, meeting him in hidden corners of the church or even in their own homes when their husbands were away. The thrill of the secrecy made it all the more intoxicating. But Father Daniel was playing a dangerous game, and deep down he knew it was only a matter of time before things spiraled out of control. As the months passed, Father Daniel became more reckless. He was confident that the women would never expose him. They had too much to lose: their reputations, their marriages, their standing in the village. He believed that as long as he maintained his image as a holy man, no one would suspect that the good father was leading a life of deceit behind closed doors. The church, once a place of worship, had become a stage for Daniel's deceptions. During Mass, he would make eye contact with Cecilia and Grace, sending them subtle signals that only they understood. He found it amusing to stand before the congregation, preaching about sin while knowing that he was living in it daily. The women in the village admired him more than ever, talking about how blessed they were to have such a charismatic priest. But gossip in the village was inevitable. Some people began noticing the extra attention Father Daniel gave certain women, especially Cecilia and Grace. Whispers spread about how often they were seen at the church, even on days when no services were scheduled. Some of the more observant women noticed how Cecilia's mood had changed. She seemed happier, almost glowing. Others talked about how Grace, usually fierce and independent, had become softer, more distracted, as if something was weighing on her mind. Even Madame Veronica, proud as she was of her son, started to sense that something wasn't right. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she noticed that Daniel had become more secretive, disappearing for hours without explanation. She dismissed her worries at first, telling herself that he was busy with his priestly duties. But as the rumors grew louder, she couldn't ignore them any longer. Father Daniel, however, was too blinded by his desires to see the storm brewing around him. He believed he was in control, that no one could see through his carefully crafted facade. Father Daniel's confidence grew with each passing day. He was no longer just a priest in the eyes of the village. He had become a trusted spiritual advisor to many families, especially those of Cecilia and Grace. These two women had completely fallen under his spell, believing that their secret affairs with him were a rare and divine connection. To them, Father Daniel was more than just a lover. He was a man chosen by God to lead them, even if their relationship was shrouded in sin. But Daniel was not satisfied. He had tasted power and now craved more. He began to wonder how much further he could manipulate these women. He was already enjoying their affection, but what if he could also profit from them financially? He knew that both Cecilia and Grace came from relatively comfortable homes, and their husbands were hard-working men who didn't spare expenses when it came to their families. The idea struck him like a spark. He could use his position as their priest to convince them to give him money, all under the guise of a divine instruction. One Sunday after Mass, Daniel invited Cecilia and Grace to a private prayer meeting at the rectory. The two women eagerly accepted, thinking it was just another opportunity to be alone with him. When they arrived, Daniel was waiting for them, dressed in his priestly robes, holding a rosary and wearing a grave expression. He started by leading them in prayer, making sure the atmosphere felt sacred and serious. After the prayers, he let out a deep sigh and said, "My dear sisters in Christ, the Lord has revealed something very important to me, something that concerns your families." The women leaned in, their curiosity piqued. They hung on to his every word, believing that they were about to receive some profound spiritual insight. "The Lord has shown me that both of your families are at risk of financial ruin. But fear not. He also revealed the solution. He has chosen you both as vessels of protection for your households. But it requires a great act of faith. Grace, who was always skeptical by nature, furrowed her brows. "Father, what exactly do you mean?" Father Daniel looked directly into her eyes and said, "The Lord has asked that you both make a financial sacrifice, a generous offering that will secure divine protection over your families. This is no ordinary request. It is a test of your faith. But this offering cannot come from you alone. It must be taken from the hands of your husbands. They must unknowingly contribute to this sacred cause for it to bear fruit." Cecilia's eyes widened with concern. "But how can we ask our husbands for money without telling them the reason? They'll surely question us." Daniel leaned back, his eyes twinkling with sly confidence. "That is where your role as wise women comes in. You know your husbands better than anyone else. Find a way to ask for the money without arousing suspicion. It could be under the pretense of needing funds for home improvements, children's needs, or even an urgent business investment. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and He has placed you both in positions where you can fulfill His will without revealing the truth." The women were conflicted. They respected their priest and believed in his words, but they were unsure how they could deceive their husbands without risking their trust. Sensing their hesitation, Daniel continued with a voice that dripped with reassurance. "Remember, this is not for me. It is for your family's protection. I am merely a messenger of the Lord's will. Do you not trust Him to guide you through this? Have I not always led you toward the right path?" His words sank deep into their minds, and the women felt guilty for even doubting him. After all, wasn't he the man of God they had put all their faith in? The one who made them feel chosen and special? Slowly, they nodded in agreement, convinced that this was truly the will of God. Over the next few weeks, both Cecilia and Grace set their plans into motion. Cecilia, ever the meek and dutiful wife, approached her husband on a quiet evening after dinner. She spoke of how the house needed urgent repairs, mentioning cracks in the walls and a leaking roof, things her husband rarely noticed because of his busy schedule. Her husband, eager to avoid any domestic disturbances, agreed to give her a substantial sum of money. He handed her the cash, trusting her completely. Grace took a different approach. Her husband was a shrewd businessman, not easily fooled. She decided to appeal to his business instincts, telling him about a lucrative trading opportunity she had heard about, one that required immediate investment to yield high returns. At first he was skeptical, but Grace's persistence and her reputation as a savvy woman convinced him. He reluctantly agreed, handing her the money with a warning to be careful. With the funds secured, both women rushed to the church the next day to hand the money over to Father Daniel. They presented the cash with a mixture of reverence and nervousness, convinced that they were doing God's work. Daniel accepted the money with a solemn nod, but inside he was rejoicing. He had successfully deceived not one, but 2 families, and all it took was a few convincing words wrapped in religious jargon. After collecting the money, Daniel made a show of praying over it, asking for God's protection over Cecilia's and Grace's households. He made it clear that this was a sacred transaction, and they should not speak of it to anyone, not even their husbands. The women agreed, feeling both relief and pride that they had passed this test of faith. But beneath all the holy talk and false blessings, Daniel was already thinking of how he would spend the money. He had no intention of using it for any church activities. Instead, he planned to indulge himself in the finer things he had missed out on while pretending to be a humble priest. The satisfaction he felt was not just from the money, but from the thrill of knowing he could manipulate these women so easily, using both their faith and their desires against them. With his pockets now full and his confidence at an all-time high, Father Daniel felt unstoppable. He had managed to extract money from Cecilia and Grace with ease, and the thrill of pulling off such a scheme only fueled his arrogance. But money was only part of what he craved. What he truly desired was to indulge himself in the pleasures of life without any risk of being caught. He knew he had to be careful in his village. People were already whispering about his close relationships with certain women. Hosting a party for the local women would surely bring attention that could unravel everything he had worked to conceal. So Daniel devised a plan. He would host a private party, but instead of inviting anyone from the village, he would reach out to women from neighboring towns. These women knew nothing of his role as a priest, and they certainly wouldn't be concerned with the moral expectations that came with it. They were simply there to have a good time, and that's exactly what he intended to give them. Using the money he had collected, Daniel rented a secluded guest house on the outskirts of one of the nearby towns. The location was perfect, far enough from his village to avoid any prying eyes, yet close enough for him to slip away unnoticed. He sent out word through discreet channels, inviting women known for their love of fun and nightlife. He made sure to select only those who were uninhibited and eager to enjoy an evening of luxury and indulgence. On the night of the party, Daniel dressed in stylish clothes that no one from his village would recognize. He traded his priestly robes for a sleek suit, looking more like a wealthy businessman than a humble man of God. The guest house was lavishly decorated with colorful lights, luxurious fabrics, and an abundance of food and drink. The atmosphere was far from what one would expect from a gathering hosted by a priest. There was nothing holy about this party. It was pure decadence, designed to satisfy every earthly desire. As the women arrived, Daniel greeted them with his signature charm. They were captivated by his smooth talk, good looks, and the aura of authority that still clung to him, even in this setting. They had no idea who he really was, and that was exactly how he wanted it. For one night, he could be anyone he wanted to be. A man free from the burdens of priesthood, free from the eyes of his village, and free to indulge in whatever sins he pleased. The party quickly turned wild, music blared from hidden speakers, and the women danced without a care in the world. They laughed, flirted, and fawned over Daniel, who reveled in the attention. He made sure the drinks kept flowing, loosening everyone's inhibitions even further. The more the night went on, the more he allowed himself to let go of the role he had been playing as a priest. Here, he wasn't Father Daniel. He was just Daniel, the charming man who knew how to make women feel special. As the night grew darker, the party took a more intimate turn. The laughter and conversations became more suggestive, and Daniel found himself surrounded by women who saw him as nothing more than an exciting fling for the evening. It was exactly what he wanted. No strings attached, no guilt, and no one who would question his actions the next day. He had orchestrated everything perfectly. Meanwhile, back in the village, Madame Veronica was growing increasingly worried. The rumors about her son had reached her ears once again. People were talking, some claiming that Father Daniel was too familiar with certain women, others suggesting that he was living a double life. The whispers gnawed at her pride. She had sacrificed so much to make sure her son became a priest, and now her worst fears were resurfacing. Unable to bear it any longer, she decided to confront Daniel. The day after his secret party, she went to the rectory, determined to get answers. When she arrived, Daniel was still basking in the afterglow of the night before. He was tired but satisfied, convinced that his secrets were safe and that he could continue living his life however he pleased. "Mama, what brings you here so early?" Daniel asked with a smile, masking his fatigue. Madame Veronica didn't return his smile. Her face was stern, her eyes filled with concern. "My son, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." Daniel's smile faded slightly. He could sense the seriousness in her tone. "What is it, Mama?" She took a deep breath before speaking. "People are talking, Daniel. They say you're involved in things that are not befitting of a priest. They say you're too close to certain women, and that you're living a life of sin. I've ignored these rumors for as long as I can, but now they're spreading like wildfire. I need to know, are any of these things true?" For a moment, Daniel felt a flicker of fear, but he quickly suppressed it. He had mastered the art of deception, and he knew exactly what to say to calm his mother's fears. With a look of indignation, he shook his head. "Mama, it's all lies. People are jealous of me because of the respect and influence I've gained. They want to bring me down, so they spread false rumors. Do you really think I would betray everything we've worked for? I'm a priest, and I take my vows seriously." Madame Veronica studied his face, searching for any sign that he was lying. But Daniel had become so skilled at hiding his true self that even his mother, who knew him better than anyone, couldn't see through the mask. "I'm only doing God's work," he continued, "but there are people who don't like to see others succeed. Please don't let their gossip get to you. Trust me, Mama, I would never bring shame to you or our family." Her expression softened slightly, and she let out a weary sigh. "I want to believe you, my son, I truly do." But remember, the truth always comes out, no matter how well it's hidden. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You have nothing to worry about, Mama. I'm doing everything for the glory of God. With that, Madame Veronica allowed herself to be convinced, at least for the time being. She left the rectory, still uneasy, but hoping that her son's words were true. As she walked away, Daniel breathed a sigh of relief. He had dodged yet another bullet, and his double life remained intact, for now. But deep down, he knew that the web of lies he was spinning was becoming more tangled with each passing day. The more he indulged in his desires, the more he put himself at risk of being exposed. Yet, in his arrogance, he believed he could continue balancing his sinful activities and his priestly duties without anyone finding out. After all, hadn't he managed to fool everyone so far? Weeks turned into months, and Father Daniel's life continued without a hitch. He kept his affairs hidden, managed to deceive his mother, and kept up his duties as the village priest. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, one that would soon shake his carefully crafted world. Cecilia started feeling different. At first, she thought it was just stress or fatigue from handling her children and household duties. But when she missed her period for 2 months in a row, panic set in. Her heart raced as she realized what might be happening. She was pregnant, and she knew who the father was. Father Daniel. For days, Cecilia kept the news to herself, unsure of what to do. She couldn't tell her husband, who had no idea that she was involved with the priest. The guilt was eating her up inside, but she couldn't bear the thought of raising a child that would expose her secret affair. She decided there was only one person she could talk to: Daniel. One afternoon, she made her way to the rectory when she knew it would be empty. Daniel was alone in his office, reviewing church documents, when she knocked on the door. He looked up and smiled when he saw her, but his smile faded when he noticed the anxious look on her face. "Cecilia, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "Father Daniel." "I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel froze, the color drained from his face as her words sank in. This was the one complication he had always feared: a pregnancy. He had been reckless, thinking that he could enjoy these affairs without facing the consequences. And now, those consequences had caught up with him. "What do you mean you're pregnant?" Daniel demanded, his tone sharp. "I mean exactly that. I'm carrying your child," she replied, tears welling up in her eyes. "What are we going to do?" Daniel felt a surge of anger and panic. He had no intention of letting this situation ruin his life. "What we're going to do is simple. You're going to get rid of it." Cecilia's eyes widened in shock. "Get rid of it? You want me to abort the baby?" "Yes," Daniel snapped. "Are you out of your mind? You're a married woman with a husband and children. You can't keep this baby. Do you know what this will do to both of us if people find out?" Cecilia shook her head stubbornly. "No, I can't do that. I am a mother. I could never kill my own child. How could you even suggest that?" Daniel's patience was wearing thin. He stood up and leaned closer, his voice cold. "Listen to me, Cecilia. I'm not about to ruin my life because of your carelessness. Do you honestly think I would marry a married local woman like you? You're living in a dream. We were never meant to be anything more than what we already are. You were just supposed to be discreet. I'm not getting tied down in some scandal because you want to play mother to this mistake." His words cut deep, and Cecilia felt like she had been slapped. She couldn't believe that the man she had trusted, the man she had believed was sent by God, could speak to her with such cruelty. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over, and she wept silently. "You're heartless," she whispered. "After everything, this is how you repay me. I thought you cared about me." Daniel scoffed. "This was never about love, Cecilia. You were an escape for me, nothing more. I told you from the start, we need to be careful. If you keep this child, you're going to destroy both our lives. I won't let that happen. So you either get rid of it, or you're on your own." "I won't do it," she said firmly. "I'll keep this child, even if it costs me everything." Daniel's frustration boiled over. "Then don't come crying to me when everything falls apart. You're making a terrible mistake, and you'll regret it." Cecilia left the rectory in tears, her heart heavy with regret and fear. She felt lost, but one thing was certain. She couldn't go back to the life she once knew. Cecilia's mind was in turmoil after her confrontation with Father Daniel. The weight of the pregnancy hung over her like a dark cloud, and she knew she couldn't hide it forever. Desperation drove her to a risky plan. She would try to pin the pregnancy on her husband, Thomas. It was the only way she could think of to keep the truth buried. One evening, after their children had gone to bed, Cecilia gathered the courage to tell Thomas about the pregnancy. She hoped that if he believed the baby was his, things would settle down. But instead of the reassurance she longed for, Thomas's reaction was one of disbelief. The idea of another child seemed impossible to him. They had already agreed that 3 children were enough, given their strained resources. Thomas remained firm, reminding her of the struggles they already faced with the children they had. Life wasn't easy, and adding another baby would only bring more difficulties. His words hit Cecilia hard, shattering the fragile hope she had clung to. She realized her plan was falling apart. Panic set in, and she felt cornered. With no support from Thomas and the fear of her secret being exposed, Cecilia made a desperate decision. She couldn't imagine facing the shame of carrying a child that wasn't her husband's. The only way out, in her mind, was to end the pregnancy herself. She knew of women in the village who had done it before, using dangerous local herbs. She sought out an old woman known for such remedies. Ignoring the old woman's warnings about the risks, Cecilia purchased the herbs. Late that night, while her family slept, she boiled the mixture. The bitter aroma filled the small kitchen as she forced herself to drink the concoction. It tasted like poison, but she gulped it down, hoping it would all be over soon. The hours that followed were nothing short of a nightmare. Pain gripped her body, waves of unbearable cramps and dizziness. Cecilia tried to stay quiet, not wanting to wake her family, but the agony was overwhelming. By morning she could barely move. Her strength was fading fast, and when Thomas found her, she was pale and drenched in sweat. In a panic, Thomas rushed her to the nearest clinic. But by the time they arrived, the damage was done. The herbs had caused a miscarriage, but they also unleashed internal bleeding that the doctors couldn't control. Despite their efforts, Cecilia's condition worsened, and within a few hours, she was gone. The news of Cecilia's sudden death spread through the village like wildfire. Everyone was shocked and saddened, unable to understand how she could go from being healthy to losing her life in such a tragic way. The whispers grew, but no one knew the real reason behind her death. Thomas was left devastated, a grieving husband now burdened with raising their children alone. While the village mourned, Father Daniel felt a twisted sense of relief. When he heard that Cecilia had passed away, it was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. With Cecilia gone, the risk of his secret coming out was buried along with her. The problem of the unwanted pregnancy was no longer his concern. To the villagers, he put on the face of a grieving priest, offering prayers and condolences. But inside, he felt nothing but satisfaction. In Daniel's mind, everything had worked out in his favor. There would be no scandal, no child to tie him down. He believed he was free, that his secret was safe. He had played his cards carefully, and for now it seemed like he had won. But even as he celebrated his victory in silence, the seeds of his own downfall were already being sown. Rumors have a way of spreading like wildfire, especially in a small village. After Cecilia's sudden and tragic death, people couldn't help but talk. Whispers filled the air, and soon enough a disturbing rumor started to circulate. Father Daniel might have been the real father of the child Cecilia was carrying. Thomas, still grieving, didn't pay much attention to the gossip at first. To him, they were just malicious lies meant to tarnish the reputation of a holy man. But as the days passed, more people came to him with hushed voices and suspicious looks, suggesting that there was more to Cecilia's pregnancy than met the eye. They hinted that Father Daniel had been closer to Cecilia than he should have been, and that perhaps the priest was hiding something. The rumor gnawed at Thomas's mind. He couldn't believe it, but the doubts started to creep in. What if there was some truth to what people were saying? What if Cecilia's secret was more than just a tragic mistake? Torn between disbelief and the need for answers, Thomas decided to confront Father Daniel directly. One afternoon, he made his way to the rectory, determined to clear the air. Daniel welcomed him warmly, unaware of the true reason for Thomas's visit. With a heavy heart, Thomas looked into Daniel's eyes and asked the question that had been tormenting him. "Father, people are saying things that are hard to believe. They're saying you were involved with my wife, Cecilia, and that you might have been responsible for her pregnancy. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I had to hear it from you." Daniel's heart raced for a moment, but he was well practiced in hiding his emotions. He put on his calm, sincere face, the one that had won the trust of so many in the village. With a steady voice, he looked Thomas in the eye and denied everything. "Thomas, I understand how painful these rumors must be, especially after everything you've been through. But I swear to you, there's no truth to them. People are always quick to spread lies, especially when they see a man of God trying to do the right thing. Cecilia was a devoted member of our church, but there was never anything inappropriate between us." Thomas searched Daniel's face for any sign of deceit, but all he saw was the familiar kindness of the priest he had known for years. Relieved, he sighed and nodded, accepting Daniel's words as truth. "I knew it couldn't be true, Father. I just needed to hear it from you. I'm sorry I even had to ask," Thomas said, his voice heavy with emotion. Daniel placed a comforting hand on Thomas's shoulder, offering words of reassurance. "You did the right thing by coming to me. Let's not let baseless rumors distract us from our faith. We need to focus on healing and moving forward, especially for your children's sake." Thomas felt a weight lift from his heart. He had been foolish to let the village gossip get to him. How could he have doubted a man like Father Daniel? To show his appreciation and commitment to the church, he even went a step further. He promised to make a donation to support the house of God, a gesture of faith and gratitude. "Father, I want to help in any way I can. The church has always been there for us, and I feel it's time to give back. I'll bring some money next week to support the work you're doing here." Daniel smiled warmly, hiding the dark satisfaction brewing inside him. Not only had he dodged another potential threat, but he had also gained more support from Thomas, who was now more loyal than ever. Everything was falling perfectly into place, and Daniel's confidence grew even stronger. As Thomas left the rectory, convinced that the rumors were nothing more than lies, Daniel felt a renewed sense of control. He had managed to keep his secret buried, and with each passing day, he believed more and more that he was untouchable. But while Thomas walked away with his doubts eased, the village wasn't so easily fooled. The whispers didn't die down, they grew louder. And though Daniel felt secure, the web of deceit he had woven was slowly tightening around him, waiting for the moment it would all unravel. Soon Grace discovered she was pregnant, and terrified of what could happen, rushed to tell Father Daniel. She hoped he would take responsibility, but instead Daniel denied being the father. With a cold expression, he told her to get rid of the baby. Grace refused, saying she wanted to divorce her husband and be with him. She believed Daniel could give her the life she dreamed of. But Daniel laughed at her boldness and told her she was too local for him. He said he could never marry someone like her. His harsh words broke Grace's heart. Crushed, Grace went back home, hiding her tears. But things got worse when her husband discovered the truth. Furious, he spread the news around the village, telling everyone that Grace was carrying the priest's child. The story spread quickly, and the village was in an uproar. It was considered a grave sin for a married woman to sleep with another man, especially a priest. The men in the village decided that Daniel and his mother deserved punishment for bringing disgrace to their community. One of the youths, who was secretly one of Daniel's boys, heard about the plan. He quickly ran to Daniel, who was at his mother's house. Panting, he warned them that the village youths were coming to beat them up, and they might even kill them. Panic spread through the house. Daniel and his mother quickly packed a few clothes and some valuables. Without wasting time, they fled to the city under the cover of night. By the time the angry villagers arrived, Daniel and his mother were long gone. Enraged that they had escaped, the youths took their anger out on the house. They set fire to it, burning it to the ground. But their fury didn't stop there. They marched to the church, the place where Daniel had deceived so many, and set it ablaze as well. The once peaceful village was now filled with flames and the cries of those who couldn't believe what had happened. Grace, meanwhile, faced the full wrath of the community. Since it was an abomination for a married woman to commit adultery, especially with a priest, the elders decided that she should be banished. In shame and sorrow, Grace was forced to leave the land she once called home. She walked away with nothing, rejected by both her family and the community. Dear viewers, this tale teaches us that no secret can remain hidden forever. Actions have consequences, and the choices we make, especially those driven by greed, deceit, or lust, can lead to ruin. Father Daniel's selfish desires not only destroyed his life, but also brought shame and suffering to others. The story shows that dishonesty and betrayal eventually bring disgrace and punishment. No matter how much someone tries to escape the truth, it always finds a way to come to light. In the end, we should let integrity and respect for others guide our actions, because living without these values only leads to sorrow and regret. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications to get notified whenever we upload new stories. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.